The blood on Dominic Castellano's hands had not yet dried when he heard the sound. A scraping noise, metal against metal, coming from the rusted shipping container in the corner of the abandoned warehouse. He raised his Beretta, finger already on the trigger. Behind him, the body of the traitor was still warm, slumped against the concrete pillar where Dominic had left him. The man had sold information to the feds. He had paid the price. But if there was a witness, Dominic moved like a shadow, his Italian leather shoes silent on the filthy floor. 15 years of building an empire had taught him many things. Never hesitate, never show mercy, never leave loose ends. He reached the container. The door hung open, barely attached to its hinges. The smell hit him first. Rotting food, human waste, something dead or dying. Dominic pulled the door wide and aimed into the darkness. What he saw made him freeze. A child, a skeleton wrapped in skin, sitting in a nest of garbage and torn newspapers. The rags that passed for clothing hung off bones, so prominent he could count every rib. Matted hair the color of dried blood. And eyes, green eyes that stared at him without fear, without hope, without anything at all. The child held a broken bottle, its jagged edge glinting in the dim light. Dominic had seen men beg at gunpoint. He had watched hardened criminals weep and plead for their lives. He had heard every desperate promise a human being could make when facing death. But this child did not beg. This child did not cry. This child simply raised the broken glass to her own throat and looked at him with those empty green eyes. The message was clear, written in the language of the damned. You want to do it? Or should I save you the trouble? Something cracked inside Dominic's chest. A door he had sealed shut 26 years ago. He saw another face superimposed over hers. A boy with his same eyes, his same smile. His twin brother Marco, 10 years old, the last time Dominic ever saw him. The vision vanished as quickly as it came. Dominic lowered his gun. The child did not react. She kept the glass pressed against her neck, waiting, patient, as if she had done this before, as if she knew exactly how this story ended. Then her sleeve slipped, and Dominic saw them. Scars, dozens of them, crisscrossing her thin arm, some old and white, some pink and healing, some fresh enough to still be scabbed. His jaw tightened until his teeth ached. The child watched him watching her. Slowly, she lowered the broken bottle. Her cracked lips moved, trying to form words, but no sound came out. Nothing, not even a whisper. She could not speak, would not, could not. The realization hit Dominic like a bullet to the chest. The child leaned forward. With one trembling finger, she began to write in the thick layer of dust coating the container floor. The letters were shaky, uneven, the handwriting of someone who had not held a pencil in a very long time. Dominic read the words, and his blood turned to ice. Are you one of his people? Who is he? Dominic's voice came out rougher than he intended. He crouched down, keeping his distance, his gun now holstered but his body still tense. The child did not answer. She could not answer. Instead, she pressed herself deeper into the corner of the container, her bony shoulders scraping against the rusted metal. Her green eyes darted between him and the open door, calculating escape routes that did not exist. She moved like a cornered animal, feral and desperate, but without the energy to actually flee. Her lips moved again, forming shapes, making no sound. Dominic watched her throat work, watched the tendons strain in her neck as she tried to force words out. Nothing came, not a whisper, not a croak, just silence. This was not a child who chose not to speak. This was a child who had forgotten how. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Victor's name flashed on the screen. Boss, we have a problem. The Russian accent was clipped, urgent. Police scanner picked up a call. Someone reported gunshots. Units are 3 minutes out. We need to move. Now. Dominic looked at the child, at her hollow cheeks and protruding collarbones, at the scars on her arms and the emptiness in her eyes, at the question she had written in the dust. Are you one of his people? Someone had done this to her. Someone powerful enough to make a child fear even strangers in abandoned warehouses. Boss? Victor's voice crackled through the phone. Did you hear me? 3 minutes. Dominic made a decision that defied every rule he had ever followed. He ended the call, pocketed his phone, and extended his hand toward the child, slowly, carefully, the way one might approach a wounded bird. I am not his, he said quietly. Whoever he is. The child stared at his hand, at the blood still staining his knuckles, at the calluses from years of violence. Then she did something that broke him more than any resistance could have. She went limp. Her body simply surrendered. as if she had learned long ago that fighting was pointless, as if being carried away by strange men was something she had experienced too many times to count. Dominic lifted her from the filth. She weighed nothing, less than his tactical bag, less than the weapons he carried. She was hollow, empty, a shell that had once contained a child. The smell hit him as he pulled her close. Rotting food, dried urine, infection and decay. His hand pressed against her back to support her, and he felt them. Ridges, dozens of raised lines beneath the thin fabric of her shirt, scars layered upon scars, so many that her skin felt like a topographical map of suffering. Dominic's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. He carried her to the black SUV waiting outside. Victor was already behind the wheel, engine running. The Russian's eyes widened when he saw what his boss was carrying, but he said nothing. He simply shifted the car into drive. In the back seat, the child did not look out the window. She did not watch the city lights blur past. She pressed her ear against Dominic's chest and closed her eyes, her tiny fingers counting something invisible. 1, 2, 3, 4. She was counting his heartbeats. Victor glanced in the rearview mirror, watching the scene unfold. The most feared man on the East Coast, sitting in silence with a broken child in his arms. He did not ask questions. He recognized that look in Dominic's eyes. The last time he had seen it was 26 years ago, in a faded photograph of two boys standing outside a Brooklyn apartment. One of those boys had disappeared, and Dominic Castellano had spent every day since then becoming the kind of monster who could find him. The elevator doors opened to the 50th floor, and Emma stopped breathing. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Manhattan's glittering skyline. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors so polished they reflected like mirrors. Leather furniture worth more than most people's annual salary sat arranged in perfect symmetry. Everything was cold, expensive, and immaculate. Emma did not step forward. Her small body went rigid in Dominic's arms. Her fingers, which had been counting his heartbeats moments ago, now dug into his shirt with desperate strength. A sound escaped her throat. Not a word, not a scream, just a thin, animal whine of pure terror. Dominic felt her trembling intensify. Her eyes were fixed on the penthouse, scanning the marble floors, the expensive artwork, the gleaming surfaces, and suddenly, he understood. This child had not been living on the streets her whole life. She had been in places like this before. Beautiful places, expensive places, places where rich men did unspeakable things behind closed doors. Victor. Dominic's voice was quiet but commanding. Kill the lights. All of them. Leave only the dim ones. Victor moved without question, hitting switches until the penthouse transformed from a glittering showcase into something softer. Shadows crept across the marble. The crystal chandeliers went dark. Only a few scattered lamps remained, casting pools of warm amber light. Emma's breathing slowed slightly, but she still would not move. Dominic set her down gently, keeping his hands visible. She stood at the elevator threshold like a prisoner at the gates of hell, her bare feet refusing to touch the polished floor. She reached for his wrist, her finger pressed against his skin, and she began to write. The letters were shaky, barely legible, traced with the desperation of someone who had no other way to speak. BEAUTIFULROOMS. She paused, then continued. MOREPAIN. Dominic read the words on his skin, and something twisted in his chest. Beautiful rooms meant more pain. Luxury meant suffering. This child had learned to associate wealth with horror, opulence with abuse. She had not been homeless. She had been kept, used, passed around among people who could afford the finest things in life, including the destruction of innocence. This is different, Dominic said, his voice low. No one will hurt you here. Emma looked at him with those ancient green eyes. She did not believe him. Why would she? Every adult had probably said the same thing before proving it to be a lie. She took one step into the penthouse, then another. Her bare feet made no sound on the cold marble. She moved like a ghost, drifting past the leather furniture, past the expensive artwork, past everything beautiful and terrifying. She found the darkest corner of the living room, where the shadows were thickest, where the light could not reach, and she curled into a ball, pressing her back against the wall, making herself as small as possible. Dominic did not approach. He lowered himself to the floor 10 feet away, his back against the opposite wall. Slowly, deliberately, he removed his jacket. $10,000 of Italian craftsmanship. He folded it carefully and slid it across the floor toward her. Emma did not touch it, but for the first time since he found her, she truly looked at him. Not through him, Not past him, at him. Her green eyes searched his face, looking for the trap, the trick, the inevitable cruelty. She found nothing she recognized, and that terrified her more than anything else. 3 days passed like shadows across the penthouse floor. Emma remained in her corner. She slept there, curled into a tight ball, her back pressed against the wall. She only ate when Dominic placed food at a distance and turned away, giving her the privacy to consume it like a feral creature protecting its kill. She still hid portions in her pockets, still flinched at sudden movements, still counted heartbeats whenever Dominic came near. On the 3rd day, Dr. Helena Park arrived. She was a slender woman with steady hands and kind eyes that had seen too much darkness. Once a rising star at Mount Sinai, she now worked exclusively for Dominic, asking no questions, keeping no records. The underworld paid better and demanded less paperwork. Helena spent 2 hours with Emma, moving slowly, explaining every action before she took it. The child did not resist, but she did not cooperate either. She simply went still, her body rigid, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond the walls. When the examination was complete, Helena walked to the balcony and stood there for a long time, her shoulders shaking. She was crying. Dominic found her there, staring at the city lights with wet cheeks. "Tell me." Helena's voice was barely controlled. "She has been systematically tortured for at least 18 months, possibly longer. The scarring on her back indicates repeated beatings with a belt or similar instrument. The burns on her arms are consistent with cigarettes extinguished on flesh. There are signs of prolonged confinement in extremely small spaces. Her muscles have atrophied in patterns that suggest she was kept in a cage or closet for extended periods." Dominic said nothing, his hands curled into fists at his sides. "Her vocal cords are physically intact," Helena continued, "but she cannot speak. The condition is called psychogenic mutism. Her voice shut down as a defense mechanism after prolonged screaming produced no rescue. Her brain learned that screaming was pointless, so it stopped allowing her to make sound at all." "How long?" "Based on the atrophy of her throat muscles, I estimate she has not spoken a single word in approximately 23 months. 23 months of silence. Nearly 2 years of screaming into the void until her own mind decided sound was useless." "There is something else," Helena said quietly. "I ran her description through every database I could access. Missing children, foster care records, hospital admissions, school enrollments." She paused. "Nothing. Emma Grace Sullivan does not exist in any system. No birth certificate, no medical records, no proof she was ever born at all. A ghost. A child who had been erased from the world before she was old enough to remember it." That night, Dominic heard a sound from the living room. He moved silently down the hallway and stopped in the shadows. Emma stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, her small figure silhouetted against the glittering skyline. 50 stories below, the city pulsed with life. Cars moved like blood cells through concrete arteries. People walked, oblivious, safe. Her hand was pressed flat against the glass. Her head was tilted, calculating the distance to the ground. Dominic did not shout. He did not rush toward her. He simply sat down on the cold floor, 10 feet away, and spoke quietly. "If you jump, I will never know his name." Emma froze. "The man who did this to you," Dominic continued, his voice soft as a blade wrapped in velvet. "You wrote a question in that container. You asked if I was one of his people. If you die, I will never find him, and he will keep doing this to other children." Slowly, Emma turned from the window. Her lips moved, her throat worked, and for the first time in 23 months, sound emerged from her broken voice. A whisper, hoarse and shattered, like glass grinding against stone. "Whitmore. The name echoed in Dominic's mind long after Emma had fallen asleep. He sat in the darkness of his study, turning the syllables over like stones in his palm, searching for meaning. By morning, Victor had mobilized every resource at their disposal. Hackers, private investigators, contacts in law enforcement, informants in government offices. The machinery of the underworld churned into motion, all focused on a single name. 48 hours later, Victor returned to the penthouse. His face was pale. His hands, which had steadied sniper rifles in Chechnya, trembled slightly as he placed a thick folder on Dominic's desk. "You need to see this, boss." Dominic opened the folder. The first page contained a photograph of a distinguished makes man in his late 50s. Silver hair perfectly styled, expensive suit tailored to precision, a smile that radiated warmth and trustworthiness, the kind of smile that made people feel safe. "Judge Theodore Whitmore. Federal judge," Victor said quietly. "Appointed 12 years ago. served on the bench for cases involving human trafficking, child exploitation, organized crime. He has the harshest sentencing record in the entire federal system. Traffickers get maximum penalties. No exceptions. No plea deals. Dominic turned the page. More photographs. Whitmore shaking hands with the vice president. Whitmore receiving an award at a black tie gala. Whitmore surrounded by smiling children at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. He founded Innocent Futures 15 years ago, Victor continued, a charity dedicated to rescuing children from trafficking networks. They have saved over 500 kids, built shelters, provided counseling, reunited families. Another page, magazine covers, television appearances, Whitmore on CNN, discussing the horrors of child trafficking. Whitmore on the cover of Time, named one of the most influential people in humanitarian work. 3 nominations for the International Human Rights Award. Close personal friend of the Vice President, regular guest at the White House. He is called the father of the forgotten children. Victor paused, letting the weight of the information settle. Boss, he is untouchable. FBI, police, judges, politicians, half of them owe him favors. The other half worship him. If we move against him without absolute proof, our entire empire collapses. Every agency in the country will come down on us. Dominic said nothing. He stared at the photograph of the smiling judge, the savior of children, the champion of justice, and he thought of Emma's scars, her silence, the terror in her eyes when she saw beautiful rooms. He looked toward the living room. Emma was asleep on the sofa, not in her corner, on the sofa. For the first time, she had chosen comfort over concealment. Her small hand clutched a piece of fabric torn from his ruined jacket, holding it against her chest like a talisman. The monster who had broken her smiled from magazine covers and shook hands with presidents. "Find me everything," Dominic said. His voice was cold, absolute, the voice of a man who had already made his decision. Every child he has ever rescued, every charity trip he has ever taken, every dollar that has ever passed through his accounts. Victor hesitated. And if he is actually clean? Dominic turned slowly. His gray eyes had become black holes, swallowing all light. No one gets nominated for Human Rights Awards 3 times and stays clean. Victor. No one. Dominic learned to wait. Every evening, he sat on the floor of the living room, 10 feet from Emma's corner. He did not speak. He did not demand answers. He simply existed in her space, a constant presence that asked nothing and threatened nothing. On the 5th day, Emma moved closer. On the 7th day, she sat within arm's reach. On the 9th day, she reached for his hand, her finger pressed against his palm, and she began to write, 1 letter at a time, slow and deliberate, the way a child learns to form words for the first time. MOMMYSOLDME. Dominic kept his breathing steady. His face revealed nothing. Emma continued writing, FOURYEARSOLD. Who did she sell you to? Dominic asked quietly. Emma's finger traced new letters. NICEMAN. She paused, then added, NICEMAN, WORKS, FORHIM, him, Whitmore. The pieces were connecting. Do you remember your mother's face? Emma shook her head slowly. Her finger moved again. ONLYSMELL. What smell? BURNING. Dominic understood. Heroin, cooked on tinfoil. A mother who had traded her daughter for her next fix. The sessions continued. Each night, Emma revealed another fragment of the nightmare she had survived. Her finger traced stories across his palm that would have broken lesser men. She told him about the beautiful house with the locked basement, about the room with no windows where 7 children slept on mattresses on the floor, about the numbers painted on the wall above each bed. 7 children? Dominic repeated. Emma held up both hands. She raised 7 fingers. Then slowly, deliberately, she began folding them down. 1 finger fell, then another, then another. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Her hands closed into fists. 0. Dominic felt ice spread through his veins. They are all gone? Emma nodded. What happened to them? She did not write an answer. She simply drew her finger across her throat, a gesture that needed no translation. You were number 4, Dominic said carefully. The others. They did not make it, but you are here. You survived. Emma looked at him with eyes that held centuries of suffering, eyes that belonged to an old woman, not a 7-year-old child. She shook her head slowly. Then she took his hand and wrote one final message. Her finger pressed hard. each letter carved with desperate precision. IDIDNOTSURVIVE. She paused. IESCAPED. Another pause. DIFFERENT. Dominic stared at the invisible words on his palm. She had not survived. She had escaped. Different. Survival implied endurance, healing, moving forward. Escape was just running, fleeing, leaving pieces of yourself behind in the darkness. Emma had not survived her captivity. She had simply gotten out before it finished killing her. The distinction was a blade that cut straight to Dominic's heart. This child did not see herself as a survivor. She saw herself as something barely rescued from the grave, still half dead, still bleeding from wounds that would never fully heal. And somewhere out there, a federal judge smiled for cameras while 6 other children lay in unmarked graves. The penthouse was dark, except for the amber glow of a single lamp. Dominic sat in the shadows of his study, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. He had not moved for hours. His eyes were fixed on something far away, something that existed only in memory. Victor found him there at midnight, summoned by the silence that felt heavier than usual. "Boss, you should sleep." No response. Victor sighed and settled into the chair across from Dominic. He did not notice the small figure crouched behind the leather sofa, green eyes watching from the darkness. "You are thinking about him again," Victor said quietly. "Marco." The name hung in the air like smoke. "I remember when you first told me," Victor continued. 15 years ago. The night you recruited me. You said you were building an empire for one reason only." Dominic remained silent, but Victor kept talking. Perhaps he thought his boss needed to hear the words. Perhaps he simply needed to say them. Twin brothers, born in Brooklyn, poor family but happy. Your father worked double shifts at the docks. Your mother cleaned houses. You and Marco were inseparable, 2 halves of the same soul. Victor's voice dropped lower. Then one day, you were both walking home from school. A van pulled up. Men grabbed you. You fought. You bit. You kicked. You got away. He paused. Marco did not. The silence that followed was suffocating. Your parents searched for years. They spent everything. Sold the house. Begged police. Hired investigators. Nothing. Marco had vanished. And eventually, the grief killed them. Your father's heart gave out first. Your mother followed 2 months later. Victor looked at Dominic's motionless form. You were 16 when you buried them. Alone. And you swore you would find the men who took your brother. You would burn down the entire world if you had to. Enough. Dominic's voice cut through the darkness like a blade. He had not turned around, but somehow he knew. Come out, little one. Emma emerged from behind the sofa, her bare feet silent on the marble floor. Her green eyes were wide, absorbing everything she had heard. She walked toward Dominic with a determination he had not seen before. She stopped directly in front of him and did something she had never done with anyone. She reached out and touched his hand. Not to write, not to communicate, simply to touch, to connect. Then her finger pressed against his palm. Marco, Dominic's breath caught. WHATNUMBER. He stared at her. What do you mean? Emma wrote again. INTHERONUMBERSONWALMARCO The world stopped, spinning. Dominic dropped to his knees, bringing his eyes level with hers. His hands were shaking. For the first time in 26 years, his hands were shaking. You saw names on the wall? In the basement? Emma nodded. You saw Marco's name? Another nod. What number? Emma took his trembling hand. Her small finger pressed against his palm and traced a single digit. 1 Marco Castellano. Number 1. The first child, 26 years ago. The monster who had taken Dominic's brother was the same monster who had taken Emma, and Dominic had finally found him. Victor worked for 72 hours without sleep. He called in every favor, bribed every contact, hacked every database. The machinery of Dominic's empire turned with ruthless efficiency, all focused on one target. When he finally returned to the penthouse, his face was gray with exhaustion and something darker. Horror. I found it, he said quietly. All of it. He spread the documents across Dominic's desk. Financial records, photographs, shipping manifests, communication logs spanning 3 decades. Whitmore started the operation 30 years ago, before he was a judge, before he was anyone. He was a prosecutor back then, working cases involving child exploitation. That is how he learned the market. Victor's voice was hollow. Innocent Futures is the perfect cover. They identify vulnerable children, runaways, foster kids, children of addicts, kids that no one will miss. The charity rescues them publicly, gets praised for it, and then quietly sells the ones that match certain criteria. Criteria? Dominic's voice was ice. Age, appearance, compliance. Victor swallowed hard. The buyers are specific. CEOs, politicians, foreign diplomats, even royalty from 3 different countries. Whitmore never touches the children himself. He is just the broker, the middleman. He connects supply with demand and takes his percentage. Dominic stared at the documents, names he recognized, faces he had seen on television. Pillars of society who purchase children like commodities. There is more, Victor said. He reached into the folder and pulled out a single photograph. It was old, grainy, taken with a camera that predated digital technology. The image showed what appeared to be an auction stage. Velvet curtains, wealthy figures seated in shadows, and in the center, illuminated by a spotlight, a boy, 10 years old, dark hair, gray eyes that held terror and defiance in equal measure, a paper number pinned to his chest. Number 1. Dominic took the photograph with hands that had killed dozens of men without trembling. Now they shook. He stared at the face in the image. His own face. His own eyes. The mirror image he had spent 26 years searching for. Marco, standing on an auction stage in 1998, being sold to the highest bidder while his twin brother searched the streets of Brooklyn, never knowing his other half was only miles away. Dominic's face went white, then red, then completely empty. The photograph fell from his fingers. Victor waited for the explosion, the rage, the destruction. Dominic had torn men apart for lesser offenses. He had burned buildings and ended bloodlines for smaller betrayals. But Dominic did not scream. He did not cry. He did not shatter the furniture or put his fist through the wall. He simply stood there, absolutely still, as something fundamental rewired itself inside him. 26 years of searching, 26 years of building an empire, 26 years of becoming a monster so he could find the monsters who had taken his brother. And now he had found them. When Dominic finally spoke, his voice was so cold that Victor felt the temperature in the room drop. Schedule a meeting with all 5 families, tonight. Victor blinked. Boss, that will take days to arrange. Security protocols alone require. Tonight, Dominic turned, and his eyes were black holes that swallowed all light. Tell them the silent death is calling in every marker. Tell them the war they have been waiting for has finally arrived. The meeting took place in a private room beneath an Italian restaurant in Little Italy. 5 men sat around the table, the most powerful crime bosses on the East Coast, each controlling territories worth hundreds of millions. Together, they represented an empire built on blood, money, and fear. Dominic sat at the head of the table, his face carved from stone. You called us here in the middle of the night, said Carmine Russo, the oldest of the bosses, his white hair slicked back, his eyes sharp despite his 70 years. This better be worth it. Dominic placed a folder on the table, then another, then a photograph. Judge Theodore Whitmore, he said. Federal Bench, Chairman of Innocent Futures. 3-time nominee for the International Human Rights Award. The bosses exchanged glances. They knew the name. Everyone knew the name. He runs the largest child trafficking network in the country, Dominic continued. Has been operating for 30 years. His charity is a front. He rescues children publicly and sells them privately to the highest bidder. He pushed the photograph forward. Marco's face stared up at them from the auction stage. 26 years ago, he sold my brother. Silence fell over the room. Carmine leaned back in his chair. This is personal. Yes, Whitmore has connections to the vice president. Half the FBI owes him favors. If you move against him, every agency in the country comes down on all of us. That is why I am here. Dominic's voice was steady. I am asking for neutrality. Do not help him. Do not warn him. Do not sell information to his people. And what do we get in return? Asked Jimmy Chen, who controlled gambling operations across 3 states. Everything. Dominic met each man's eyes in turn. When Whitmore falls, I walk away. My territories, my operations, my contacts, divided equally among the 5 of you. The room went silent again. Dominic controlled the most profitable empire on the East Coast. He was offering to burn it all down. Roberto Vega laughed nervously. You are joking. I am not. Carmine shook his head slowly. You are trading 15 years of work for a dead man and a broken child? Dominic stood. His chair scraped against the floor. I built this empire for one reason, he said quietly. To find the men who took my brother. Now I have found them. The empire has served its purpose. He turned toward the door. You have until midnight to decide. After that, I move forward with or without you. The elevator doors opened to the penthouse, and Dominic stopped. Emma was sitting on the floor beside the elevator, waiting, her green eyes fixed on him the moment he appeared. She had never done this before. She had never waited for anyone. Dominic lowered himself to the floor beside her. She reached for his hand immediately, her finger pressing against his palm. Youkillhim? No. Emma's brow furrowed. Worse. Yes, worse. HOW? Dominic looked at this broken child who had survived what his brother had not. This ghost who had crawled out of the same darkness that had swallowed Marco forever. I will show the whole world what he really is, he said softly, and he will spend the rest of his life living in that hell. Emma considered this for a long moment. Then she wrote one more word on his palm. GOOD. 1 week passed, and Emma began to test him. It started with the vase. Ming Dynasty. $50,000. It sat on a pedestal near the window, a relic from a deal Dominic had closed years ago. Emma walked up to it, looked directly at Dominic, and pushed it off. The porcelain shattered against the marble floor, pieces scattered everywhere, centuries of history reduced to fragments. Emma stood frozen, her shoulders hunched, her eyes squeezed shut, waiting for the blow, waiting for the punishment she had been conditioned to expect. Dominic said nothing. He walked to the closet, retrieved a broom, and began sweeping up the pieces. When he finished, he disposed of the shards and returned to his chair. Emma stared at him with confusion written across her face. The next test came with food. She stopped eating, completely. Every meal Dominic placed on the table remained untouched. Every snack left in her corner went ignored. She drank water, but nothing else passed her lips. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Dominic replaced each meal with fresh food. He did not comment. He did not plead. He did not force her to eat. He simply made sure there was always something available when she was ready. On the 3rd morning, Emma cut her hair. She found scissors somewhere and hacked at her auburn locks until they hung in uneven chunks around her face. Then she stood before the bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection with defiant eyes. When Dominic found her, he surveyed the damage without expression. "What color do you like?" he asked quietly. "I will find someone to fix it properly." Emma's defiance crumbled into confusion. No anger, no punishment, no cruelty. Every test she threw at him, he absorbed without reaction. On the 4th day, she collapsed. Dominic heard the thud from his study. He sprinted down the hallway and found the bathroom door locked. He did not hesitate. His shoulder hit the wood once, twice, and the lock splintered. Emma lay on the cold tiles, unconscious, her skin pale, her breathing shallow. 4 days without food had finally broken her starving body. Dominic gathered her into his arms. She weighed nothing, less than nothing, a collection of bones held together by damaged skin. He held her against his chest and felt something crack inside him, something he had sealed away 26 years ago when Marco disappeared, something he had convinced himself no longer existed. He cried. For the first time since he was 10 years old, tears streamed down the face of the silent death. They fell onto Emma's matted hair, onto her hollow cheeks, onto the child who had pushed him away because she did not know how to accept love without expecting pain. Emma's eyes fluttered open. She looked up at the man holding her, at the tears tracking down his cheeks, at this killer, this monster, this king of the underworld who was weeping because she had hurt herself. Slowly, she raised her hand. Her fingers touched his wet cheek, tracing the path of a tear, as if it were the strangest thing she had ever seen. Then she opened her mouth. You. Not like them. 3 words. Clear. Audible. The most she had spoken in almost 2 years. Dominic held her tighter and let the tears fall. Judge Theodore Whitmore sensed the danger before he could name it. 30 years of operating in shadows had given him instincts sharper than any predator. Someone was digging. Someone was asking questions. Someone was getting too close. He made 3 phone calls from his private study. The first was to a senator who owed him favors. The second was to a police commissioner who owed him his career. The third was to a number that only 6 people in the world knew existed. Salvatore Benedetto answered on the second ring. I need information, Whitmore said. Dominic Castellano. What is he doing? Sal had served Dominic faithfully for 12 years. He had killed for him, bled for him, sworn loyalty that was supposed to last until death. But Sal had another master, an older debt, a darker secret. He found a girl, Sal said quietly, brought her back from Boston. She does not speak, but she writes. She has been telling him things. Whitmore's blood turned to ice. What kind of things? About a basement, about numbers on walls, about children who disappeared. The line went silent for a long moment. What does she look like? Sal described her. Auburn hair, green eyes, 7 years old, scars everywhere. Whitmore's hand tightened on the phone until his knuckles went white. Number 4, the only one who had ever escaped, the only loose thread in 30 years of perfect operation. He had searched for her for months after she ran, but she had vanished into the streets, and he had assumed the winter would finish her. He had been wrong. Bring her back, Whitmore said. Tonight, whatever it takes. The attack came at 3 a.m. The penthouse security system went dark without warning. Cameras, alarms, motion sensors. Everything died simultaneously. 6 men emerged from the service elevator. Professionals, armed, moving with military precision. They were not there to kill Dominic Castellano. They were there for the girl. Victor responded first. Gunfire erupted in the darkness. Bodies fell. Blood sprayed across marble floors. Dominic grabbed Emma and pressed her into the corner of his bedroom, his body shielding hers. She did not scream. She did not cry. She simply watched the violence unfold, with eyes that had seen too much horror to be shocked by more. When it was over, 6 attackers lay dead. 2 of Dominic's men had fallen as well. The penthouse smelled of gunpowder and death. Boss. Victor's voice was grim. Sal is gone. He disabled the security from inside. Dominic closed his eyes. 12 years of loyalty. Bought and sold. Where is Emma? Victor pointed toward the living room. Dominic found her sitting beside one of the dead intruders. Her small hands were covered in blood, but she was not crying. She was not traumatized. She was drawing. Her finger moved through the pool of blood spreading across the floor, tracing lines with terrible precision. Walls, corridors, rooms, a map. Dominic crouched beside her and studied what she had created, a detailed floor plan of a building. Multiple rooms marked with numbers, passages, exits, every detail pulled from the memory of a child who had been imprisoned there. Emma looked up at him. Her bloody finger wrote numbers beside each room. 12 rooms total, 12 children. Then she crossed out 9 of them, and beside the remaining 3, she wrote, Stillalive. Detective Maria Santos agreed to meet at a warehouse on the Brooklyn waterfront. She arrived alone, as instructed. A woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes and the posture of someone who had spent years fighting battles she could not win. Her badge was clipped to her belt, her hand resting near her service weapon. Dominic emerged from the shadows. Victor flanked him, watching every angle. You have been investigating Whitmore for 5 years, Dominic said without preamble. And you have gotten nowhere. Maria's jaw tightened. How do you know that? I know everything. I know you were removed from the case 3 times. I know you were transferred to traffic duty. I know your colleagues call you obsessed. He paused. I know about your daughter. Maria's face went pale. Her hand moved toward her gun. Isabella, Dominic continued quietly, 15 years old when she disappeared. 7 years ago. Last seen leaving school. No witnesses. No evidence. Case went cold in 6 months. You son of a bitch. Maria's voice cracked. If you are working with him, I am going to destroy him. The words hung in the air between them. Whitmore took my brother 26 years ago, Dominic said. He took your daughter 7 years ago. He is still taking children right now, and he will keep taking them until someone stops him. Maria stared at him. The rage in her eyes slowly transformed into something else. Recognition, understanding, the shared grief of people who had lost everything to the same monster. I have files, she said finally. 5 witnesses who were going to testify against people connected to Whitmore. All 5 died before they could speak. Suicides, they called them. Car accidents, overdoses. We need more than dead witnesses. I know. Maria's voice hardened. We need living proof. Children who are still in his system, but I do not know where he keeps them. I do. They both turned. Emma stood in the doorway of the warehouse, her small figure silhouetted against the dim light. She had followed them. Of course she had. She walked toward Dominic with determined steps. Her hand found his, and her finger began to write, IKNOW, No. Dominic's response was immediate. Absolute. You are not going back there. Emma looked up at him. Her green eyes were no longer empty, no longer dead. They burned with something fierce and unbreakable. Her finger pressed harder against his palm. Nu, m, b, e, r, t, wo, e, m, I, l, y, s, I, x, y, Numberyers. Her hand trembled. She paused, gathering strength, then continued. Numbersevengeracefiveyearsold. Another pause. Her fingers shook violently. Sameneasme. Emma looked up at Dominic with eyes that held no room for argument. Icanotleavethem. Emma drew the map from memory. Her small hands moved across the paper with terrifying precision, sketching corridors and rooms and hidden passages. Every door, every window, every camera position. The layout of a prison she had lived in for 18 months burned permanently into her mind. Victor studied the drawings with professional appreciation. She is accurate, to the centimeter, Dr. Helena confirmed. Trauma this severe creates photographic memory of the environment. Her brain cataloged every detail as a survival mechanism. The plan came together in 48 hours. Whitmore's Connecticut estate sat on 30 acres of woodland, surrounded by walls and security systems. The main house was a colonial mansion worth $20 million, but beneath that mansion, according to Emma's drawings, lay something else entirely. Victor assembled a team of 12 men. Former military, no questions, no hesitation. They moved at 3 a.m. The outer security fell in silence. Guards neutralized, cameras disabled, alarms cut before they could trigger. Victor's team flowed through the darkness like shadows, following Emma's map with absolute precision. The basement entrance was hidden behind a wine cellar, a false wall that swung open to reveal concrete stairs descending into blackness. Victor went first. Dominic followed. The smell hit them before they reached the bottom. Decay, waste, fear. The unmistakable stench of human suffering concentrated in an enclosed space. The corridor stretched before them, lit by bare bulbs that cast sickly yellow light. 7 doors lined the walls, each one made of steel, each one fitted with multiple locks. Each door had a number painted in red. Victor opened the first door and immediately turned away. His face, hardened by decades of warfare, crumpled. The rooms were cages, barely large enough for a dog, concrete floors with drains, chains bolted to walls, mattresses stained with things that did not bear examination. They found Emily behind door 2, 6 years old, curled in the corner, eyes empty, silent. Jake was behind door 5, 8 years old, thinner than Emma had been. He did not react when they entered. Grace was behind door 7, 5 years old. She looked up at them without recognition, without hope, without anything at all. 3 children, 3 survivors, all of them mute, all of them broken in ways that might never fully heal. The other rooms were empty now, but the stains remained. The scratches on the walls remained. The evidence of decades of horror remained. Dominic stopped before door number 1. His hand trembled as he pushed it open. The room was empty, had been empty for 26 years, but on the wall, scratched into the concrete with fingernails that must have bled and broken, were 2 words. Marcosi. Dominic pressed his palm against the letters. They were rough beneath his fingers, carved deep by a desperate child who wanted someone to know he had existed, who wanted to leave proof that he had been here, that he had been real, that he had mattered. His brother had stood in this room, his twin, his other half, 10 years old and terrified and alone. Marco had scratched his name into the wall and waited for someone to find him. No one came. Dominic fell to his knees, and for the first time since he was 10 years old, the silent death opened his mouth and screamed. Victor's team extracted terabytes of data from Whitmore's private servers. The files were organized with meticulous precision. 30 years of records, transaction histories, communication logs, photographs, videos, everything cataloged and archived as if Whitmore had been running a legitimate business. In a sense, he had been. The client list contained 347 names, 12 sitting senators, 5 CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, 3 foreign ambassadors, judges, prosecutors, police commissioners, pillars of society who had paid premium prices for access to children no one would miss. The evidence was irrefutable, undeniable, enough to bring down governments. And that was precisely the problem. If we leak this to the press, they will bury it, Victor said grimly. Lawyers will file injunctions. Judges will seal records. Half these people own media companies. If we give it to law enforcement, it disappears, Maria added. Too many cops on that list. Too many prosecutors. Dominic stared at the screen, displaying name after name after name. 347 monsters hiding behind power and money and public respect. We do not give it to anyone, he said quietly. Victor frowned. Then what? We send copies to each person on the list, individually, with a message explaining that everyone else has received the same information. Maria's eyes widened as she understood. They will panic. They will do worse than panic. Dominic's voice was ice. Each one will realize that 346 other people have evidence that could destroy them. Each one will try to save themselves by sacrificing the others. They will race to make deals, to testify, to betray their allies before their allies can betray them. They will tear each other apart, Victor murmured. Exactly. Within 48 hours, the first cracks appeared. A senator announced an unexpected resignation. A CEO was placed on administrative leave. An ambassador was quietly recalled to his home country. Then the dominoes began to fall. But Whitmore was not finished. He still had cards to play, connections that ran deeper than anyone knew. One phone call to a judge who owed him everything. The knock came at noon on a Tuesday. 20 people stood in the penthouse lobby. Police officers, child protective services, social workers, and behind them, lawyers carrying official documents. Dominic Castellano. The lead officer held up a warrant. We have a court order for the immediate removal of a minor child illegally held in your custody. Emma Grace Sullivan is a ward of the state. Victor's hand moved toward his weapon. Dominic's men tensed throughout the penthouse. The child was rescued from human traffickers, Dominic said calmly. She is under my protection. She is state property according to child welfare law. The officer stepped forward. Surrender her now, or you will be arrested for kidnapping. Behind Dominic, Emma pressed herself against his back. Her small hands gripped his shirt. She did not tremble. She did not cry. She simply held on. Dominic positioned himself between Emma and the army at his door. Over my dead body. They took Dominic in handcuffs. He did not resist. Resistance would have meant gunfire, and gunfire would have meant Emma caught in the crossfire. So he surrendered, allowing them to bind his wrists and read him rights that meant nothing. Emma screamed, not with her voice. Her voice was still broken, but she screamed with her eyes, with her hands clawing at the officers who pulled her away, with her entire body fighting to reach the man who had saved her. They separated them anyway. Dominic was taken to federal holding. Emma was placed in protective custody at a facility on Long Island. A facility that, according to records Maria Santos discovered 3 hours later, received significant funding from Innocent Futures. Maria worked through the night. She called every honest contact she had left. She dug through databases. She searched for any judge, any prosecutor, any official who was not on Whitmore's list. She found one. Judge Rebecca Chen had served on the federal bench for 20 years. In that time, she had refused every bribe, rejected every favor, dismissed every threat. Her colleagues called her incorruptible. Her enemies called her impossible. Maria called her desperate. The emergency hearing convened at 9 the following morning. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the walls. Cameras waited outside. The case had exploded across national news overnight. A mafia boss, a kidnapped child, a federal judge accused of unspeakable crimes. Emma was brought in by court officers. She looked smaller than ever, swallowed by the enormous room, surrounded by strangers in suits who decided the fates of people they had never met. The prosecutor demanded she testify. The defense objected. The arguments flew back and forth while Emma sat frozen, her green eyes fixed on a point beyond the walls. Then Dr. Helena Park stood. Your Honor, the child cannot speak in the traditional sense. Her voice was damaged by severe trauma, but she can communicate through other means. Judge Chen considered this. What do you propose? Let her draw. They gave Emma paper, crayons, colored pencils. The courtroom fell silent as she began to work. For 3 hours, Emma drew. She drew the basement with its numbered doors. She drew the faces of children who had shared her captivity. She drew the men who visited in the night. She drew Whitmore's face with such precise detail that gasps rippled through the gallery. 47 drawings, each one a piece of testimony, each one evidence that no lawyer could object to, no technicality could dismiss. The final drawing took the longest. Emma worked on it with intense concentration, her small hand moving across the paper with purpose. When she finished, she held it up for the court to see. A tiny figure huddled in a dark corner, and standing between that figure and the surrounding shadows, a tall man with his arms spread wide, protecting, shielding, refusing to let the darkness touch her. Below the image, in shaky letters, she had written a single word: Daddy. The courtroom went silent. Dominic sat in the defendant's chair, his wrists still bound by handcuffs. He looked at the drawing, at the word beneath it, at the child who had given him a name he never thought he would hear. His head bowed, his shoulders began to shake, and the silent death, the most feared man on the East Coast, wept openly in a room full of strangers. The evidence arrived in armored trucks, terabytes of data, thousands of documents, hundreds of hours of video. Everything Victor's team had extracted from Whitmore's servers now entered into official court records under the protection of Judge Rebecca Chen. The prosecution laid it out methodically. Financial transactions spanning 3 decades, shell companies funneling money through 14 countries, communications between Whitmore and his network of buyers, sellers, and enablers. Then came the client list. 347 names read aloud in open court. Senators who had championed family values, CEOs who had donated millions to children's charities, ambassadors who had signed human rights declarations. The gallery erupted. Reporters scrambled for their phones. The story was already exploding across every network, every platform, every corner of the world. Whitmore sat at the defense table, surrounded by the most expensive lawyers money could buy. His face remained composed, confident. He had weathered scandals before. He had connections that ran deeper than any courtroom. His lead attorney objected to everything, challenged the chain of custody, questioned the authenticity, demanded dismissals on procedural grounds. Judge Chen overruled them all. Then the videos began to play. The first recordings showed the basement, the numbered doors, the conditions that made hardened investigators look away. Several members of the jury covered their mouths. One excused herself to vomit. Whitmore's composure held, barely. His lawyers argued the videos were fabricated, deepfakes, sophisticated manipulation designed to frame an innocent man. Then the prosecution played the final video. The footage was grainy, shot on equipment that predated digital technology. The timestamp read 1998, 26 years ago. A basement room, a single chair, a child sitting under harsh lights, trembling. The boy was 10 years old. Dark hair, gray eyes filled with terror and defiance. A paper number pinned to his chest. Number 1. And standing beside him, clearly visible, was a younger Theodore Whitmore, 32 years old, smiling at someone off camera, gesturing toward the child like a salesman displaying merchandise. The courtroom went deathly silent. Whitmore's confident mask shattered. The color drained from his face. His hands gripped the table so hard his knuckles turned white. He turned slowly and looked across the courtroom at Dominic. And finally, after 26 years, he understood. This was not a random investigation, not a coincidence, not bad luck. This was destiny. The boy who had escaped that van in Brooklyn had spent 26 years building an empire, accumulating power, gathering resources, searching for the men who had taken his brother, and now that boy sat across the courtroom, watching Whitmore's world collapse. My brother's name was Marco. Dominic's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Every eye in the room turned to him. You sold him in 1998. You watched him stand on that stage. You took money for his life. Whitmore's mouth opened. No words came out. You killed him. Dominic's eyes were frozen hellfire. And now you will live long enough to suffer everything that comes next. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Human trafficking, conspiracy, racketeering, crimes against children spanning 3 decades. The maximum sentence available under federal law. Life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Theodore Whitmore stood motionless as the verdict was read. The man who had smiled for cameras and shaken hands with presidents now stared at nothing. His carefully constructed world reduced to ashes around him. Guards led him away in chains. He did not look back, but the destruction had only begun. Exactly as Dominic had predicted, the 347 names on that list began to devour each other. Senators raced to cut deals before their colleagues could testify against them. CEOs hired lawyers to negotiate immunity in exchange for evidence. Ambassadors fled to countries without extradition treaties, only to find those countries suddenly cooperative with international authorities. In the 6 months that followed, over 200 arrests occurred across 12 countries. A network that had operated for 30 years collapsed in weeks, eaten alive from within by the very predators who had built it. The custody hearing came on a gray Thursday morning. Judge Rebecca Chen presided once again. The courtroom was smaller this time, quieter, no cameras, no reporters, just lawyers and officials and one small girl sitting in the front row. The state's attorney made his objections clear. Dominic Castellano is a known organized crime figure. He has connections to illegal activities spanning 15 years. Granting him custody of a vulnerable child would be unconscionable. Maria Santos took the stand next. Mr. Castellano also dismantled the largest human trafficking network in American history. He rescued 3 children from that basement. He provided evidence that will protect thousands of future victims. Dr. Helena Park testified last. I have treated traumatized children for 15 years. Emma Grace Sullivan has made more progress in 2 months with Mr. Castellano than any patient I have ever seen. He has provided stability, safety, and something she has never had before. Someone who stayed. Judge Chen reviewed the documents before her. The reports, the evaluations. The testimony of a child who had drawn her protector and labeled him with a single word. The law is not perfect, she said finally. Sometimes those who break it are the only ones capable of protecting those it fails. She signed the order. Temporary guardianship. 1-year probationary period. Regular evaluations by child services. After 12 months, consideration for permanent adoption. Dominic walked out of the courthouse into pale winter sunlight. Emma was waiting on the steps. The moment she saw him, she moved. Not walking, running. For the first time in her life, she ran toward someone instead of away. She crashed into his legs, her small arms wrapping around him, her face pressing into his thigh. Her entire body trembled with something that was not fear. Then she spoke, clear, complete, the first full sentence she had uttered in 23 months. Daddy, let's go home. 6 months transformed the penthouse beyond recognition. Toys scattered across marble floors that had once reflected only cold perfection. Crayon drawings covered the refrigerator door, held in place by colorful magnets shaped like animals and stars. A small pink bicycle leaned against the wall near the elevator, training wheels still attached. And everywhere, there was laughter. The sound echoed through spaces that had known only silence and shadows. It bounced off windows that had witnessed violence and death. It filled corners where Emma had once hidden. Terrified of the light, she still had nightmares. They came without warning, dragging her back to basements and numbered doors and hands that hurt instead of helped. She would wake screaming without sound, her body rigid, her eyes searching for threats that no longer existed. But now, someone always came. Within seconds of her first movement, Dominic would appear. He would sit beside her bed, not touching unless she reached for him, simply present, a constant, a promise kept. Emma's voice returned in fragments, first single words, then short phrases, then complete sentences strung together like pearls on a thread. Dr. Helena called it remarkable progress. Dominic called it watching a flower remember how to bloom. She still hid food in her pockets, bread rolls, apple slices, crackers wrapped in napkins. The habit might never fully disappear, Helena warned. Some scars ran too deep for time to reach. Dominic did not mind. He simply made sure her pockets were always full. Emma discovered art. A private tutor came 3 times a week, teaching her techniques to express what words still could not capture. She painted her memories onto canvas, transforming horror into color, giving form to feelings that had no names. One afternoon, she presented Dominic with a new piece. The painting showed 2 figures standing before a house, one tall, one small. The windows glowed with warm yellow light. Smoke curled from a chimney. A garden bloomed in impossible colors. Above the image, in careful letters, she had written a single word, home. Dominic hung it in his study, where he could see it every day. That night, Emma climbed onto the sofa beside him. She had started doing this recently, seeking proximity instead of avoiding it, learning that closeness could mean safety instead of pain. Daddy? The word still made his chest tight every time. Yes, little one. Do you miss Uncle Marco? Dominic went very still. The question came without warning, as children's questions often did. Yes, he said finally. Every day. Emma considered this, her small face serious. But you found me. I did. Maybe. She paused, working through the thought. Maybe Uncle Marco sent me, so you wouldn't be alone anymore. Dominic turned away. He did not want her to see the tears, did not want her to worry about the man who was supposed to be strong. But Emma had survived things that would break most adults. She understood grief in ways no child should. She simply leaned against his arm and waited until he could breathe again. 1 year to the day since Dominic had found her in that container. The courtroom was different this time. Smaller, warmer, sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting golden rectangles across the polished floor. No reporters waited outside. No cameras documented the proceedings. This was a private matter, a family matter, witnessed only by those who belonged. Emma stood beside Dominic, her hand clasped in his. She had grown in 12 months. Her cheeks had filled out, her auburn hair, properly cut now, fell in soft waves past her shoulders. She wore a blue dress that matched her new confidence. She was 8 years old today. Judge Rebecca Chen reviewed the final documents, social worker reports, psychological evaluations, school records showing a child who had learned to read in 6 months and was now devouring books faster than anyone could supply them. Emma Grace Sullivan, the judge said gently. Do you understand why we are here today? Emma nodded. For the adoption. That is correct. Mr. Castellano has petitioned to become your legal father. Do you understand what that means? It means paperwork, Emma said. A small smile crossed her face. Daddy says paperwork makes things official. Soft laughter rippled through the room. Judge Chen leaned forward. I need to ask you directly, Emma. Do you want Dominic Castellano to become your legal father? Emma did not answer immediately. She turned and looked up at the man beside her. The man who had carried her out of darkness, who had sat on cold floors to be at her level, who had wept when she refused to eat, who had burned his empire to keep her safe. The man who had answered when she called him Daddy. He already is my father, Emma said. Her voice was still slightly hoarse, still carried the scars of 23 months of silence. But it was clear, strong, certain. She turned back to the judge. He has been my father since the first night. The papers are just so everyone else knows what I already knew. Judge Chen smiled. She signed the documents with a flourish. It is my honor to declare that Emma Grace Sullivan is now legally Emma Grace Castellano. This adoption is finalized. Dominic lifted Emma into his arms. She wrapped herself around him, face buried in his neck, holding on as if she would never let go. Outside the courthouse, Victor waited by the black SUV. He wore a suit for the occasion, looking almost civilized. Almost. He studied Emma as Dominic set her down, his unofficial niece, his boss's daughter, his family now, whether he had asked for it or not. Welcome to the family, little one. His Russian accent softened the words. Now you can learn to shoot, yes? Victor. Dominic's voice cracked like a whip. Emma laughed. The sound rang out across the courthouse steps, pure and bright and impossible. The laughter of a child who had learned that joy was allowed, that safety existed, that love did not always come with conditions and pain. I want to learn horseback riding first, she announced. Victor raised an eyebrow. Horses before guns? What kind of Castellano are you? The kind who makes the rules, Emma replied. And she laughed again, the sound echoing like music through the cold winter air. 2 years had passed since that night in the container. The penthouse was gone, sold to someone who would never know the ghosts that had walked its marble floors. In its place, a house in Connecticut. White walls, green shutters, a garden where Emma grew tomatoes and sunflowers, and anything else that caught her imagination. She was 9 years old now, healthy, happy, still visited by nightmares sometimes, but they came less frequently with each passing month. Dominic had transformed his empire into something unrecognizable. The illegal operations were dismantled or handed off. The legitimate businesses expanded. And at the center of it all stood the Marco Foundation, dedicated to rescuing children who had fallen through the cracks of a broken system. They had saved 47 children in 2 years, 47 lives pulled from darkness. One evening, Emma found Dominic on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. She climbed onto the bench beside him, tucking her feet beneath her. Daddy? Yes, little one? Do you remember the first night? In the container? Dominic nodded slowly. Every second of it. Emma was quiet for a moment. Were you scared? When you saw me holding that broken glass? He considered the question carefully. No, I was not scared of you. Then what were you scared of? Dominic turned to look at his daughter, the girl who had been a skeleton wrapped in skin, who had forgotten how to speak, how to trust, how to hope, who now argued about bedtimes and begged for ice cream and laughed at cartoons like any other child. I was scared that I would walk away, he said quietly. Like everyone else had done to you. I was scared I would fail again. Emma absorbed this. Her green eyes, once empty as winter skies, now sparkled with life and curiosity. But you did not walk away. No. Why? Dominic remembered that moment in the container, a broken child holding glass to her own throat, looking at him with eyes that expected nothing but pain, asking a question without words. Because you asked me something that night, without speaking. What did I ask? You asked if anyone would ever care. He pulled her into his arms, holding her against his chest the way he had that first night. But now she was warm, fed, safe, loved, and I wanted the whole world to know that the answer was yes. Emma curled into him, her eyes closing, her breathing steady and calm. She no longer counted heartbeats to measure time. She no longer hid food in her pockets. Most of the time, She no longer slept in corners. She had a home. And Dominic Castellano, the silent death, the terror of the East Coast, had finally found what he had lost 26 years ago: a family. This story reminds us of a profound truth. Family is not defined by blood, but by love. It is not where we come from, but who chooses to stay. Every child deserves safety. Every wounded heart deserves a chance to heal. And sometimes the people society has written off, the broken, the lost, the ones labeled beyond redemption, are exactly the ones capable of the greatest love. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you never miss our daily stories. Give this video a like and share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. We would love to know, how did this story make you feel? Have you ever experienced a moment when someone unexpected became your family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories, your feelings, your reflections from deep within your heart, they mean everything to us. Thank you for being here, for listening, for caring. We wish you good health, happiness in your daily life, and peace in your heart always. Goodbye for now, and we will see you in the next story.